Welcome to Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. I'm Peter Gross, co-host of the original Wild Kingdom with Marlin, Perkins, and Jim Fowler. You know, when Wild Kingdom debuted in the early 1960s, handling and training animals for form were common in many zoos. But today, animals like this African porcupine serve as wildlife ambassadors to educate rather than just entertain. These ambassadors have been hurt in the wild and would not survive without human interaction. So trained professionals bottle feed and foster the animals back to health, and the animals become imprinted on their human caregivers. Wild Kingdom showed generations of people the majesty of our animal ambassadors and helped us to care about them. When you care about something, you become committed to saving it. And that's how we all succeed in the Wild Kingdom. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom.
Baby antelopes trapped in an arroyo, while a herd of buffalo thunders across the plain. A young puma making sport of a beaver, and the badger sharing the mountainside with the predatory coyote and the bobcat. The far-ranging puma climbing the high slopes, stalking deer and elk. These and other animals provide excitement as we climb the Filmont Trail through the Wild Kingdom. Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom.
Hello, welcome to Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. The name Philmont spells excitement for scouts and scouters everywhere. I've always wanted to visit this world-famous Boy Scout ranch, but somehow I never thought of it as being an authentic part of the Wild Kingdom. Not until I read this little booklet that Jim is holding here, the Philmont Nature Story. How does it begin, Jim?
A rare opportunity awaits the outdoorsman at Philmont. Here you may see nature in relatively unspoiled beauty. See it nearly as it was when the first white man arrived more than 400 years ago. Here you see nature in action, as it has been for hundreds of millions of years.
Well, nature in action is certainly the theme of Wild Kingdom, and the location of Philmont offers lots of action in a limited area, if you can call more than 200 square miles a limited area. The ranch is located near Cimarron, New Mexico, right where the Great Plains run into the Rocky Mountains. Here was a truly remarkable opportunity to study animal communities at different elevations. So when our invitation came, Jim and I wasted no time packing our equipment and camera gear to hit the Filmont Trail up to the land of high adventure. Our host was Ray Bryan, director of Philmont Properties. To cover more ground, Jim and I split up for a while. I headed off with Bill Littrell, superintendent of the operating ranch, to meet an airplane for an aerial survey of antelope, and on the way to see their herd of buffalo. Before the West was settled, there were some 60 million of these great shaggy creatures roaming the plains, one of the greatest animal concentrations of all time. By 1900, they'd been nearly wiped out. But fortunately today, they're being preserved in protected herds like this one. Soon we got word that the airplane was coming in for a landing. Knowing that the behavior of buffalo is entirely unpredictable, we decided to retire to a safe distance. The plane was putting down on ground that once echoed to the sounds of hoofbeats and wagon wheels traveling the Santa Fe Trail. In it were conservation officers of the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish. They'd invited me to join them as an observer in conducting their annual census of the pronghorn antelope population. Our flight path took us over the beautiful Philmont Camp headquarters with its neatly laid out tent city. Flying over the range isn't quite as accurate as taking a door-to-door canvass, but the antelope cooperate by erecting the white hair on the rump as a warning signal, making them very easy to see. By counting the individual animals in a given sector, the officers can estimate the total pronghorn population of the area, and thus be guided in taking necessary measures to ensure their survival. Suddenly we saw something that made me get on the radio with Jim Fowler, who was getting ready to go on a pack trip into the mountains with a group of Boy Scouts. They were members of Air Explorers Squadron 99 of Los Alamos, New Mexico. We had a job for them to do.
We were just starting out when Marlin reported seeing what looked like a couple of little antelope fawns trapped in a deep arroyo. So following his instructions, we set out to investigate. While still in the foothills, we caught sight of a couple of coyote pups in their den, and nearby a nosy skunk. The mother coyote undoubtedly was off somewhere rustling up a little lunch for the pups. Otherwise, the skunk couldn't have gotten near the den. But still, he didn't get very far. Marlin guided us as we continued up the arroyo. Now, he says, we're very close. They're only a couple hundred yards away. And that's where they were. They must have stumbled in and couldn't make their way out. Our duty was clear. We were going to do our Boy Scouts' good deed for the day. Scouts Gary Smith and Jim Van Hecke volunteered to cooperate in the rescue, but we got no cooperation at all from the antelopes. Gary discovered that a young antelope can fly through the air with the greatest of ease. Since the mother antelope had already abandoned these young ones, we couldn't just turn them loose. We had to pack them up to go with us so we could look out for them until they were large enough to take care of themselves. We'd brought the sacks along to bag any snakes we might run across, but we all agreed that they were serving a much better purpose now. Jim Van Hecke seemed to have the calmer of the two youngsters. Gary's didn't like the idea at all. It was for their own good, however, because a bag would restrain them and yet keep them from breaking a leg. I wasn't at all surprised that the fawns hadn't been able to climb out of that arroyo. Even an adult antelope would have had a very hard time getting out of here. These burros may have carried all sorts of loads. but this was probably the first time one of them had ever packed a pair of squirming fawns. So with our new mascot safely aboard, we once again hit the Philmont Trail.
For the trip up the mountains, Jim and I joined forces at one of the base camps. With us were our trail-hardened scouts and our 2 recently adopted antelopes who were enjoying their first meal away from home. Jim had radioed back to headquarters for me to bring up the bottles, and it didn't seem to matter to the fawns that this was homogenized, pasteurized cow's milk. But it was time to hit the trail again, and while Jim took an armload of young antelope to their nursery, I had a look at the elevation chart of the country we'd be traveling. Through the pinon and juniper forest, spruce and aspen, to the pine and fir of the high slopes, from 6,500 feet up to 11,500 feet. In wilderness country, animals don't show themselves too often. To spot them, you need patience, sharp eyes, and luck. We were lucky. It was a puma. We were on him before we knew it, and for us, it was a tense moment. He was a youngster, about 8 or 9 months old. Finally, he decided to move off, and it was then that we saw there was a den nearby. We couldn't see anything in the den when he went in, but his mother was there and apparently didn't want to be disturbed. While scouting the area, we saw a badger digging a hole. He's an expert digger, and he can work in almost any position. The coyote is another animal that ranges to this elevation. A predator not afraid to tangle with a badger, who takes on all comers. All this excitement attracted the attention of the young mountain lion, and the game was on. Quickly as it started, it ended. The badger went back to his digging, and we continued up the Filmont Trail. High up in the hills, streams run and beavers build dams. The purpose of a beaver dam is to create a pond of deep water. But in the extreme dry season, the water level drops, and the beavers find themselves walking where they used to swim. Other animals are attracted to the beaver's waterworks. Frogs, and a baby bobcat out investigating the world. A beaver divides his time about equally between dam building and eating. Normally, the beaver's pond provides a safe harbor from predators. But a shallow stream is no obstacle to an inquisitive mountain lion. When threatened, the beaver slaps the water with his tail as a warning to other beavers. If this mountain lion was looking for trouble, he found it. The beaver ends the dispute by simply swimming away.
Farther up the stream, we walked up on a slow-moving porcupine who sat very nicely while I showed the scouts his famous quills. Marlin was putting in a routine check call to headquarters, and he got word of something happening upstream that we wanted to see. We approached cautiously because these state conservation officers were getting ready to blow up a beaver dam to let the water run down to the ponds that were drying up below. They had live trapped the beavers and were moving them to safety. Beavers build for keeps, and it takes a healthy charge of dynamite to break through. There was no intent to demolish the dam, but just to open a spillway to supply water downstream. The men advised us to take up an observation post a couple hundred yards upstream. Just before we got into position, a beaver from upstream was heading for the dam. We had to catch him and move him to safety. By slapping his tail, a beaver may only be sounding a warning, but this one almost drowned me. Finally, I got him safe on shore where we could keep an eye on him while we watched the fireworks. The job was a success. The beavers were released downstream where there was now enough water to carry them through the dry season.
A mountain lake is one of the true art treasures of the Wild Kingdom. And around the shore, for those who can read the signs, stories are written in the pattern of animal tracks. There is a deer, a mule deer. You know him by his ears. Grazing contentedly, he moves to the lake for a drink of water. This is where all the animals must come to drink. That's why the mountain lion waits here. The deer is instinctively wary. The lion moves downwind to escape detection. The big cat waits. Senses sharp. Nerves taut. Stealthily she moves in towards the deer. To safety, but there will be other game.
For the last of our trip, up the high slopes, we left our long-eared porters behind. From the top of the cliff, we looked across the valley and saw an elk. It was all we could do to get ourselves over the rocks, but a few scuffed knees were a small price to pay for a close-up view of an elk in the wild. Of course, the proper name is Wapiti, as the boys reminded me. This was a young stag with only 3 tines on his antlers. Elk move up into the mountains in summer to get away from flies and mosquitoes, but this fellow didn't seem to have escaped them altogether. As he moved closer, we crouched down, and he never knew we were there. Sitting on a nearby cliff, a red-tailed hawk, wonderfully equipped for hunting, with sharp talons, strong wings, and keen eyes. It wasn't the elk he was eyeing. It was a rat. The hawk waited until the rat left its hole. With the rat safely pinned in its talons, the hawk covers it with his wing to conceal it from some other predator who might be tempted to steal it from him.
When we returned to base camp, we found our friends of the Game and Fish Commission waiting to show us a large female black bear that had been raiding our camp. They'd captured her in order that she might be moved to a more remote location. Suddenly, we heard a great ruckus in the corral. And the cause of the ruckus turned out to be a bear cub. There was only one way to deal with the situation. The wranglers would get the horses safely out of the corral. Then we'd go in after the bear. I've captured animals in many different ways, but this is the first time I ever used a garbage can. The cub belonged to the female that the conservation men had captured and would be taken along with her to be released along a less traveled part of the Philmont Trail.
I doubt if that bear will ever go near a Boy Scout camp again.
I doubt it too, Jim. Unfortunately, because his natural ways often conflict with the ways of man, a great deal of protection is required to assure the survival of the bear. Protection is the main business of the men of the various state and national conservation agencies. The Philmont bull insignia is proudly displayed by thousands of scouts around the world. It's the mark of a man who has hit the trail to high adventure. Philmont is more than an adventure in outdoor living. It's also an adventure in conservation. Scout officials cooperate with the State Game Department and with numerous regional and national conservation programs in planning the best use and protection of all the natural resources of the area: soil and water, forest and animal. So we're grateful to the Boy Scouts of America for a trip that was not only exciting, but inspirational. For all along the Filmont Trail, we found men and boys dedicated to preserving for future generations the many splendors of the wild kingdom.
Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom.
Like what you saw? Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for more exclusive content. And visit our website at wildkingdom.com.